Let's go ahead and get started. So the topic today is how do discount rates affect my ExxonMobil lump sum? If there's anyone here who's not from ExxonMobil, don't worry. Almost everything that I say will apply to any lump sum that's calculated today. There's just a few little things that might be different about your plan from the ExxonMobil plan. So first, I'm going to say a few words about Bogart Wealth, and then we'll get into the topic itself. And I will introduce myself as part of explaining Bogart Wealth. So Bogart Wealth is a registered investment advisor, RIA. And in the investment world, there's two types of advisors, ones who work for a bank and ones who are independent of any bank. And we're in that independent category. Our clients have their accounts at Charles Schwab, and they give us a limited power of attorney to act on their behalf to buy and sell things in their account. I'm happy to explain that a lot more anytime you want, other than right now. So we have about 900 households, and the vast majority of them are somehow related to ExxonMobil. So one or both, if it's a couple, retired from ExxonMobil, or maybe they still work there and they're planning on retiring from there. A little under $2 billion in assets under management. So as a registered investment advisor, we are required to be a fiduciary in all things that we do for you. What does that mean? It means we have to put your interest first. And if there are any conflicts of interest, then we have to disclose those fully and always act in good faith. We need to be very transparent, particularly when it comes to the fees you're paying, et cetera. So this is our company. It's still a relatively small company. The investment advisors are on the top row. So you see me there with my distinguished hair color. The rest of the folks are supporting our clients, either working directly with Schwab to communicate things that our clients want communicated, working directly with the portfolios, or doing the planning work for when we're developing financial plans for our clients. We also have a tax team, so that part of the package that we give you is not just investment advice, but taking the whole tax picture into account, both when we're buying and selling things in the account, and then over a longer period of time, optimizing taxes during your retirement. We have 3 locations. You be the judge whether they're convenient locations or not. Started out in McLean, Virginia, a couple of freeway exits north of Gallows Road. For those of you to whom Gallows Road means something, got the idea that they might be shutting down that Gallows Road facility and came to Houston to see if we could convince people in Houston to have a financial advisor in Virginia. And I was one of the first. So I'm a heritage ExxonMobil retiree, and I signed on with Bogart Wealth. And then when it was time for me to retire, they offered me a job, and I said no, and my wife said yes, and here I am. But we quickly decided we need a location in the Woodlands. So today there's still a fair number of people in the McLean, Virginia office. The second biggest office is the Woodlands office, and I'm out here in West Houston. So those are our 3 offices. Our mission statement is to help our clients achieve financial peace of mind. We do that by preserving and maximizing wealth and we emphasize the intergenerational aspect of it. So some of the biggest uncertainties in your plans a lot of times turn out to be your children or your parents, and we can help with all of those things. So in the boxes below, it shows you the kinds of topics that we get into with our clients, like custom tailored retirement plan. If you have a supplemental plan, do an analysis of that to help you understand it. Cash flow planning, you can read these on your own. Our not at all hidden agenda is we would like to meet with you one-on-one for a financial strategy session. The whole purpose of doing these webinars is to give you a feel for our breadth of knowledge, and hopefully that will convince you that you do want to come in for a one-on-one session where we can get beyond the generalities and down to your specific numbers. So today's seminar is just one in a long list of retirement readiness. Retirement planning timeline covers every topic related to retirement, but only about an inch deep. So all the rest of these were suggested by people who came to past seminars and said, you know, you really ought to drill down on this topic and this topic and this topic. Retirement income planning, one of my favorites, but every one of these is important to some degree. So finally, we move on to today's topic, and I want to mention that I have opened the chat box and the question and answers. So if you have a question as we go along, just type them in there and I will get to the questions as I can. Again, for those who came a little bit late, if you're not with ExxonMobil, almost everything that I have to say will apply if you have a lump sum option in your pension plan. So a few of the particulars that are ExxonMobil specific and might be different for your plan. The Pension Protection Act of 2006 splits the retiree population into two groups: those who are grandfathered from the plan and those who are covered under the plan. So to be grandfathered, I'll get to the details on another slide, but basically you got to be about 64 years old or older to be grandfathered from the Pension Protection Act of 2006. So probably most, if not everyone on this call today is going to be covered by the Pension Protection Act. So it limits companies who are offering a lump sum option. It defines what discount rates are going to be used. It defines actuarial tables to be used. And it did a few other things that we're not really going to talk about today, like non-spousal beneficiaries able to do rollovers and after-tax balances rolling over to Roth IRAs and diversification of the company match. So for example, at ExxonMobil, before this law came into effect, to get the 7% instead of just the 6% match, you had to put all of that match into company stock. Well, that's no longer necessary, but a lot of people never got that news and they're still doing all 7% to company stock. No longer necessary. And it defined IRA and 401k contribution limits. Not like they didn't exist before, but they had to be updated from time to time. Now they update automatically. Okay. So again, who is grandfathered? For whom does the Pension Protection Act of 2006 not apply? The way ExxonMobil worded it is if you were over 50 by the end of 2007 and had more than 10 years of service before January 1, 2008, there's no change. Well, that might have made sense if, the year were 2007. It doesn't make any sense to think of it that way anymore. So a better way to think about it is, were you eligible to retire before the end of 2012? So there was 5 years from the first implementation. So 2006 Act, implemented in 2007, 5 years to have it fully implemented. So that means the end of 2012. If you're eligible to retire by the end of 2012, then you're grandfathered. Well, even that doesn't make a lot of sense now, 9 years later. So I like to think of it in terms of you had to be born before 1958 and hired before 1998 in order to be grandfathered. For the people who are grandfathered, the math is pretty simple. We just use 95% of the 30-year Treasury bond. Here's a link where you can find that. There's plenty of other places on the internet you can find the 30-year Treasury. And then they round it to the nearest quarter of a point. Now, kind of the fly in the ointment for these folks is that they're stuck using a year 2000 mortality table. They're not allowed to update it. So lifespans have gone up in the last 20 years. So that's kind of the downside of it, that you're stuck with this old mortality table, but you've got Treasury bonds, which are always lower than the corporate bonds we're going to talk about that the rest of you have. So, okay, if you're grandfathered, you're using the 30-year Treasury bond. This is what it's looked like over the last 40 years. And you can see here was an all-time low, and it already bounced back up from that earlier this year, but it came back down and up a little bit. So how does that translate into quarters? So basically the data from the fourth quarter of 2018, in this case, applies to the second quarter of 2019. There's always one dead quarter in between. Let's fast forward here. The data from the current quarter, the fourth quarter of 2021, is going to be what's in effect in the second quarter of 2022. So you take the weighted average of the 30-year Treasury bond, and each day counts the same. So you're not taking the 3 monthly numbers and averaging them. You have to, if you're going to just use the monthly numbers, you have to weight them by the number of market days in that month. All right, forget that. We just take the daily ones and every day counts the same. Okay, so I had a question that came in, and it's a little bit off topic because it's about the 401k. It's not about interest rates. But this is an important question for every one of you who are considering retiring from ExxonMobil to be aware of. So I'm going to just read this question to you. It says, they're already retired and their 401k is still in Voya, and they're thinking about doing an in-plan Roth conversion as a retiree. So the question is, will this impact my ability to do NUA? Again, this has nothing to do with the pension and why most of you logged in today, but this is really important. So if you do a Roth conversion, that is considered a distribution from that pre-tax account and into the Roth, but it's a distribution from that pre-tax account. And so that very well might impact your ability to do NUA. So it depends on your age. If you're not yet 59 and a half and you do that in-plan conversion, then you will not be able to do NUA until you reach 59 and a half. And then that's a new qualifying event. So you'll still have another bite at the apple. If you're over 59 and a half, forget it. Don't do that Roth conversion. Instead, go ahead and roll out of Voya and do the Roth, do the NUA all at the same time. Or decide that NUA is not that important for you. And I'm happy to help you with that decision one-on-one. Okay, so another question is someone who says, am I going to cover the non-grandfather? Yes, most of today is going to be about the non-grandfather. I'm going to finish up on the grandfathered right here, and all the rest of this is going to be for non-grandfather. And you were hired in 1998. You were not hired before 1998. So yes, indeed, you are not grandfathered. Okay. So the math is pretty simple for the people who are grandfathered. We're able to do things like say, in this quarter, there's 48 days left. So in order, right now we're projecting a 2.0. In order for it to pop up to 2.25, then the rest of the days are going to have to average 2.2824 or more. And for every day that adds on to this chart that's below 2.2824, the rest of them are going to have to average even higher. For it to pop back down to 1.75, it's going to have to average 1.9425 or less. And then we can look at statistics for the variability over the last several months and even assign a probability to either of these two things happening. So for the grandfathered people, we kind of know this stuff and it's easy to calculate. For the non-grandfathered people, it's everybody else. So that means that you were born after 1957 or hired after 1997, you're covered by the Act, okay? So instead of using one long-term treasury bond rate, it uses 3 segments of a high-quality corporate bond yield curve. And I'm going to say more about what all that means. That's what the rest of this presentation is about. And it uses mortality tables that get released by the IRS every year. That does not mean the company uses the newly released table every year. The company is only required to change tables at least once every 10 years. So the company appears to still be using the 2018 mortality table. Again, if you're not from ExxonMobil, they may be using a different mortality table. And longer life is good. And we've had longer life right up until 2020. So there is no table yet that includes the COVID experience, but for darn sure, the COVID experience is going to pull those life expectancies back down. So let's hope the company keeps using the 2018 table for a bit longer. Okay. So this is a look at what those 3 segments mean. So segment 1 is a short-term interest rate. It's anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. And these are, again, corporate bonds, but high quality corporate bonds. So that means they're either single A, double A, or triple A companies. Doesn't include any of the B's, any of the C's. What you're looking at here is our modeling of this. So we're trying to predict it as time goes along. And then the actual. Well, in segment 1, you don't see any daylight between the predictions and the actual. But in segment 2 and 3, you can. So like, particularly if we look here in 2020, with this crisis going on, we were predicting a faster drop than the Treasury Department ultimately calculated. So these numbers are published by the IRS, but they're calculated by the Treasury Department. And here in segment 3, right in here, we said it was going down, and they said, no, it's still going up, bozo. Okay, so we're not perfect in our projections. I'll just have to admit that right up front, but most of the time we get it pretty close. So this is sort of the analogous history to what I was showing earlier for the Treasury bonds, except now we have the 3 segments. And again, the data from the 4th quarter that we're in right now will apply to the 2nd quarter of next year. There's always one dead quarter in between that sort of allows you to make your plans. So it's sort of hard to look at these, and they're sometimes moving in different directions, and figure out what's it really mean to me. So we calculate a single rate equivalent, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail about, well, where does that number come from? But if you look at these, they're not a lot different from segment 2. Okay, so if it's like you want to just simplify it all, just track segment 2 close enough to tell you how much the interest rate is changing. But then that begs the question, well, okay, if the interest rate here from 3rd quarter, from 2nd quarter changed by 42 to 43 basis points, how much difference does that make in my lump sum? We're going to get to that. So that's why we calculate the single rate equivalent, is so that we can make these comparisons, so that we can then translate that into dollars in your lump sum. And why do we do it? 2 different numbers, one for 55 and one for 60. Well, I'm going to show you that in great detail in the next couple of slides. But the short answer is because segment 1 applies to the first 5 years of your retirement, segment 2 applies to the next 15 years, and segment 3 applies to everything after 20 years. If you retire at 55 instead of 60, and you assume that the mortality table ain't much different, both of them say you're going to live to about 85, then you're going to have more years after 20 years. So you're going to have more years where segment 3 applies. And if you're like, I have no idea what you just said, don't worry. I have a slide that's going to make it very clear. Okay, this is the chart that gives the single rate equivalent for age 60, so that we can get that same kind of 40-year view of what interest rates have done. This one's a little bit more noisy because along with giving you the month by month, I'm giving you the quarter by quarter. So that you can kind of see interesting things like the rate really popped up in the financial crisis of 2008. Remember, that crisis was about toxic bonds. So nobody knew which were the toxic bonds, so nobody wanted any corporate bonds during that period of time. That means the interest rates really spiked up, but only for that 1 month. And you see, when you averaged it out, that quarter wasn't so bad, kind of interestingly enough. But these have been going down, 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 down. We reached this all-time low in the 1st and 2nd quarter of 2021. And then in the 3rd quarter, it popped up. The 4th quarter was even with the 3rd quarter. And it looks, well, not it looks like, we know that the 1st quarter of next year will be lower. As this table shows, it will be back down 17 to 18 basis points. So, okay, a question came in and says, if I request now to retire in the first quarter of 2022, and the rate turns out to be lower in the second quarter, so right now we're projecting it'll be up, but it's way too early to book that. So what if it turns out that it's lower? Then what is the date in the first quarter in order to get that lump sum? So first of all, when will we know the number? It'll be known officially when the IRS publishes the December number. Then you'll be able to calculate the fourth quarter of 2021 actuals that will determine the second quarter 2022 discount rate. So when will they publish the December number? I used to be able to tell you it'd be in the third week of the month, but I'll tell you, they've been getting later and later and later. So a week ago, we did not have September's number yet. And what do I mean by that? So hold on, let me pop out of this and go over to the internet. So this is the IRS page that has these minimum segment values. And it basically, to get what the first quarter number is going to be, we average together August and September. Well, we didn't have September's number a week ago. We just got it, I think, last Friday morning, if my memory serves me correctly. Friday morning, this finally got published. Now, we knew it before then. Knew, that's not the right word to use. We were projecting it before then. Just like right now, we're already projecting the second quarter number. And we were within 1 basis point of the right answer. But to actually know it officially, you won't know it until almost the end of January before you'll know the second quarter number. Okay. And to get your March 1st check, if that was the benefit commencement date you had selected, March 1st, or to get the check on March 1st, you have to have the benefit commencement package completed, notarized, returned into the hot little hands of Human Resources 35 days in advance. So you're running right up against knowing officially what the second quarter number is in order for your check to show up on time if you decide to stick with the first number. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do I really care whether my check shows up on time? Because you can get the paperwork into them late and still get the first quarter number. You just won't get the check on time. 30 of those 35 days are required by federal law. So it's not like just ExxonMobil Human Resources being hard to live with. It's federal law that says those 30 days. Why the 5 extra? I don't know. Maybe if there was some small mistake that can be easily fixed in those 5 days, you can still get in under the required 30 days by federal law. Maybe that's why the extra 5 days. Okay, so now I'm going to get into how do we calculate these numbers, and so this is going to help you understand why 55 is different from 60, how we calculate the single equivalent rates, et cetera, et cetera. So I first want to emphasize what's at the bottom of the slide, and that is that this is a simplified example, and it illustrates the impact of age, of life expectancy, and of the interest rates. This is not going to get you an agreement with ExxonMobil's calculation of the lump sum down to the penny. You know, if you think about it, a penny on $1 million, how many decimal places is that? You can mess that up by just not using the same rounding rules they do in Excel and all the calculations that have to be made. So don't expect you're going to get to the penny. This is a simplified example, and anybody who wants to get into the details of how it's really calculated, I'll be happy to talk to you about that one-on-one. It's just not the subject of a general discussion. So the way to think about it is that the lump sum is the present value of the annuity. So for a person who's retiring this quarter, and I know a lot of you are interested in, but what's going to happen next quarter? We'll get to that. Okay, someone who's retiring this quarter at age, right on their birthday, at age 60, we know that these are the 3 segmented rates. We can build a little table like this in Excel. I'll admit to having back calculated these numbers to come out with a nice even $1 million of a lump sum. So their annuity, $4,797.14 a month, which is $57,566 a year. So we make this table going out to their 84th birthday. Okay, so they're going to live through their 83rd year, but not a single moment in their 84th year. That's sort of the life expectancy of a person at 60. So for the first 5 years, we're going to discount it at 0.62%. So we get these discount factors, and these are the present value. So that you're kind of answering the question. Let's look at the 6th year. We're asking the question of how much money would you need to invest today at a 2.77% return in order to have enough money to pay that annuity in year number 6. Okay. And it's pretty simple how that math works. You do that for all of these years, 5 years at segment 1, 15 years at segment 2, anything at 20 years and beyond in segment 3. And just sort of an observation that out here after 20 years, these things are only worth about half the value in terms of present value. So it's going down in present value pretty fast. You add all those up and you get the $1 million. That's the lump sum. Okay. Now, the single equivalent rate is what would be the internal rate of return of buying this cash flow for $1 million today. Let me jump ahead to, this is how you would calculate that. There's 2 ways to do it. One would be you use the internal rate of return method. And you say, I'm buying this cash flow with $1 million. So minus $1 million plus the cash flow for the 24 years. And then you use the formula IRR of this range. And it'll give you 2.77. Another way to do it would be to replace this series of interest rates with a single number and say, what single number do I need in order to get this to be $1 million? And I would start with my initial guess being segment 2. Okay, and then use Excel data, what if, goal seek, to change that interest rate in order to force that cell to $1 million. You get the same 2.77. Okay, so I've got a follow-up question here. It is sort of going back to this page. It says, so March 1 benefit commencement date, you'll get the first quarter rates. Yes. So the last possible day to be on the payroll would be February 28th. Correct. So if you work until the end of March, then there's no way you get the first quarter rate. Absolutely correct. So this is different for grandfathered versus non-grandfathered. So you've been spending all of your career talking to people older than you. and they told you about work until the end of the quarter. Now, you don't get that anymore. So thank you for asking this question, by the way. Because I should have made that very, very clear. The interest rate that applies is the interest rate in effect on your benefit commencement date. So we'll talk later about what if I retire and put off taking the pension. So it's not what's in effect on your last day on the payroll. It's not what's in effect your first day of retirement. It's what's in effect on your benefit commencement date, which could be separated by years if you wanted it to be from your retirement date. That's what the rules say. And then the rules further say, asterisk footnote, unless you're grandfathered and you take the first available benefit commencement date after your last day on the payroll, in which case now your discount rate is the discount rate in effect on your first day of retirement. So that would allow a person to work until March 30th, with March 31 then being their first day of retirement and April 1 being their benefit commencement date. They would get the first quarter rate for a grandfathered person. But for a non-grandfathered person, forget all of that. The interest rate that applies is the interest rate on your benefit commencement date. The last benefit commencement date in the first quarter is March 1. So I should also say, for those who didn't know it already, benefit commencement date is always the first of the month. Always the first of the month. Okay. Thank you for that question. So we just went through this table of the present value of the annuity at age 60. And now I want to show you how it would look different for someone who's 55. So if they're 55, and let's just say for argument's sake that they're also going to die on their 84th birthday. So this isn't perfectly correct. What's perfectly correct is the longer you live, the longer your life expectancy. You know, a 90-year-old person does not have a life expectancy of 84. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? And it didn't jump up suddenly. So the longer you live, the longer your life expectancy. But in this range of 55 to 60, it's just not that big a deal. So for clarity, I'm just going to make this simplifying assumption. They have the same life expectancy as a 60-year-old did. Okay. So because they're starting the annuity earlier, we know they're only going to get 75% of what the 60-year-old got. And so it's only $43,174 per year, but they're getting it for 5 extra years. Now, did the 5 extra years come at the beginning or the end? Well, okay, sort of both. So in a way, of course, it came at the beginning because they started that cash flow at 55. But in terms of how this table works out, they've got 5 more years at the end of it. So in a sense, those 5 years all came at the end and they were heavily discounted. Okay, they're worth only about 40% of what a year at the beginning was worth. All right. Why am I making a big deal out of this? I'm making a big deal out of this because when we get all said and done, the present value of their annuity is $836,943, which is a lot more than 75% of a million. So we all have in our minds that if we take the pension early, we're going to lose 5% a year, right? If we start the pension before age 60, we're going to lose 5% a year. And that's true when it's expressed as the annuity. But it doesn't translate that way in the lump sum. And this table shows you why, because you get 5 extra years, 5 more years out of 24 years. Well, that's a lot, but they're highly discounted years. Oh, so it's not as much. Okay, so they're getting, I'm going to round this off and call it a 15% haircut. So they're getting about 85% of the lump sum instead of a 25% haircut, giving them only 75% of the annuity. Okay? So that's one important concept, is that taking the lump sum early is not as big a reduction as you might have expected. But the other thing is that you're exposed to the segment 3, the highest discount rate for longer. So your single equivalent rate has got to be higher. It's 2.89% instead of the 2.77%. Okay. So again, this is how we calculate the single equivalent rate. You've got 2 different ways you could do it. If you want to be even more precise about it, you'd recognize that in 5 years, the person gained about half a year of life. So it's not exactly what I'm showing on these pages. But okay. This is probably the one that most of you came here for. And that is, all right, I got all that, but boil it down for me. How much of these different interest rates impact my lump sum? How many dollars? Okay. So what I've done here is taken that first case that I have, a lump sum of $1 million, and said, what if rates go down from there, which it looks like they will in the first quarter, right? It looks like they're going to be down somewhere in this range, 0.1%. Maybe it'll end up as much as 0.25%. And how much is that? That's $10,000 to $25,000. And you can see I'm like totally ignoring these numbers over here. Not that they don't matter, it's just that the methodology we're using is going to get us in that $10,000 range. Thousands of dollars we'll probably get right. Hundreds of dollars we're probably going to be off. Okay. Okay, so I got a question that really should have been back here. And maybe it came back here, I just didn't see it. So isn't the life expectancy of a 55-year-old less than a 60-year-old? Yes, yes, yes. And that's what I was saying on this page. I'm making a simplifying assumption they're the same, but it's not true. Because again, every year you don't die, your life expectancy goes up. And in the range of 55 to 60, it's about 1 month for every year. So that means that a 60-year-old has 5 to 6 months higher life expectancy than a 55-year-old. And again, if you want to get these single equivalent rates closer to right, you have to take that into account when you are doing the single equivalent rate calculation. Okay, so back on the impact of the interest rates. So in doing these calculations, what we typically do is say, you know, take segment 1 down by, let's just say 0.1. Take segment 2 down by 0.1. Take segment 3 down by 0.1. well, then it stops making sense, although it is physically possible. It stops making sense when you get to this like decrease by 1%, you got a negative number in segment one. Sorry. That's kind of the methodology that we do. So it's not perfect. It's not perfect, these tables, but they're pretty close. And what I would say to carry around with you, this is the one to remember, that a 1% change in interest rate is a 10% change in lump sum. And that means for $1 million, that's 100,000. Okay. 1/10 of 1% is 10,000. So that's a lot. Okay. And this is where you hear people start to say things like, well, if the interest rate goes up that much, I'll be working for free. Yeah, maybe. Okay. I've never actually seen it work out where somebody worked for free. Because of interest rate changes. But it might be true 1 quarter to the next, and certainly 1 month to the next. So if somebody was comparing retiring July 1st versus June 1st this last summer and saying that month they'd be working for free, okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that. But that's the rule of thumb. I first sort of bumped into this rule of thumb back when I was looking at, back in 2006, when I was looking at the Pension Protection Act of 2006 for the first time. I was still an ExxonMobil employee, and I was trying to gauge how much of a difference would it make to be in these corporate bond rates versus treasury bond rates. And I came up with, it's going to be about 1% difference in discount rate, and that's 10% in the lump sum. So I've been carrying that one in my pocket now for, I don't want to think about how long that was, 15 years. And this is a good rule of thumb. And it bears out. It's 9.5% in this example, 11%. As far as the rule of thumb, that's pretty good. Okay, so now we looked at the person 60 years old retiring in the 4th quarter with these segmented rates. What if they defer now till January and have these rates? And I'm just going to pretend like their annuity is exactly the same. It can't be. If they have another month on the payroll, they've got another month of service, so their annuity has to go up. But okay, let's just run it with the same numbers as if they retire on the same day, maybe into November, but they don't take the lump sum on December 1st, instead they take it on January 1st. Okay, so now we put in the new segmented rates, and sure enough, it pops up by $26,000. Okay. So there's a question that said, but okay, now what if I'm looking at 1st quarter versus 2nd quarter? Well, now that is an interest rate going up. And if it's going up, and we're saying by 17 basis points, well, 17 basis points would be a change of 1.7% then in the lump sum. The 1.7% on $1 million is 17 million bucks. I'd be more than happy to run your numbers exactly for you. And it might come out to 17,100. It might come out to 16,900, but it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be pretty close. Okay. So I already mentioned this before, but let's dive into a little bit more now. that a person can go ahead and retire and just defer taking the pension. So in fact, I would say there's three things that people tie together in their mind that can happen in very different time frames. So retirement, and the big deal there is keeping your medical benefit. Okay, so retirement and keeping your benefits. Number two, getting access to your pension. And number three is getting access to your savings plan. So these things can be separated by many years. So when would you consider delaying your pension? So first of all, you have something else to live on. So, maybe you have a working spouse. Maybe you've got after-tax money saved. Maybe you're an executive and you got this supplemental thing coming your way and you're going to be able to live off of it, or you got restricted shares or whatever. You've got another source of money. You don't need the money right away. That's number one. And then it's particularly you're retiring before age 60. And why is that? Well, I mentioned before that you have that 5% per year haircut that you get. And it's not for retiring before 60, it's for commencing the benefit. What benefit? The pension benefit before age 60. Okay. So if you retire at 55, but you don't take the annuity until 60, it's going to be a bigger annuity, right? You would only got 75% of it if you start at 55, but you can get 100% of your vested benefit at age 60. Now, this is different for people who are not retirement eligible. A whole lot of these rules change for them. They do not get their vested benefit until age 65. And they don't have nearly as many choices about what pension to take. So we're not going to talk about them. For people who are retirement eligible, if you take the benefit before 60, you get that haircut. So one of the reasons to delay would be to not have that haircut. But I also mentioned that the haircut is not as big if you're taking it as a lump sum. It's only 3% a year, not 5% a year. Why was that again? Because it's the present value of the annuity, and the assumption is you'd be getting the annuity for more years, and so the present value of it cannot possibly be as big a reduction as the annuity, reduction in the annuity itself. Okay. So the other one would be you're taking the lump sum and you expect interest rates to fall. If you're not yet 60, this is pretty much a no-brainer because you're getting that, let's call it 3% a year for just delaying and getting closer to 60. And it, by the way, it's not 3% a year, it's 3/12% per month. Okay, so every month counts. So you're getting that, and if you're expecting interest rates to fall, you're getting that benefit as well. So if you're already 60, it's not so much a no-brainer because your life expectancy is not going up that fast. It's going up 1 month a year, as opposed to it would have to go up 1 month per month in order to keep up. And so basically every year you've got almost 1 year less in that present value table. Okay, so you got to be a little bit more circumspect about it once you're over 60. But still, if you're expecting a big decrease in interest rates, you're definitely going to defer and capture that interest rate cut. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so there was a question that says, but if you invest your lump sum and you make more than 5%, actually, I would say make more than 3% on an investment, wouldn't it make sense to take the lump sum because interest rates are so low? And, to that I'd say, yes, but there's a difference between guaranteed returns and assumed returns. So yes, this was the lowest interest rate in the history of man. But, back here, we were expecting interest rates were going to come back up to 6%. So here's just a little anecdote for you. Back when I worked for ExxonMobil, and they didn't have this Pension Protection Act yet, you could download off the intranet an Excel workbook and run as many different pension cases as you wanted to. And you could assume any interest rate you wanted to, but they locked it at 4% because interest rates would never be below 4%. Okay, well, obviously interest rates got lower than that, didn't they? So now I guess we expect interest rates to come back to here. But what is it that's driving this? What is it that's driving the disinflationary events that we've seen for the last 40 years? Well, that's a long topic. I'd love to go into it with you one-on-one. But the bottom line is there are things that are driving inflation: monetary creation, the supply chain disruptions, people refusing to work, and therefore some low-wage jobs are having boosts in their wages. Those are inflationary factors, but there's a big deflationary factor that's been driving this trend for 40 years, and it hasn't gone away. So we will see which of these two forces end up being bigger and more important over the long run, whether these interest rates pop back up to 4%, pop back up to 6%, pop back up to 8%. Any of those are possible, but something is driving this, and that something has not gone away. So, okay, someone asked, how do I get a copy of this? Send an email to me or to my assistant, Mindy Harbor, and we'll be happy to get you a PDF of this presentation. But I'm not done yet. I'm almost done. We want to talk about the retirement roadmap. What do you have to do? I like this version of it. This one's nice and colorful, but this one appeals to the engineer in me. So this is for somebody who wants their retirement check to show up on January 1. They want that lower first quarter BCD, but they don't want to work any longer. They want the check to show up on January 1. For it to show up on January 1, they have to have their benefit commencement paperwork returned by November 27th. Okay. Now, the reason for this 90 to 120 days in advance requesting the package is it used to take them 4 to 7 weeks to get the package out. They're now getting it out in less than 4 to 7 days. So you don't need the 120 days. You don't really need the 90 days. It's quite possible to request it November 1st and still get it back to them by November 27th. Okay, it's possible. And to request the package, you go online to Human Resources, request. It's called the Intent to Retire package when you ask for it. It's called the Benefit Commencement package when you receive it. Okay. And in that, you have to tell them your last day on the payroll, your first day of retirement, and your benefit commencement date. Your first day of retirement is always the day after your last day on the payroll. Okay. You also have to inform your supervisor in writing. It doesn't have to be formal, just an email. Hey, Joe, just to let you know, I'm requesting my intent to retire package. These are the dates I'm giving to HR. I suggest you copy your timekeeper on that email and you specifically request your supervisor, hey, Joe, would you please inform the timekeeper to start my retirement smart form? And if the timekeeper reads that, they won't even wait for the supervisor to tell them. Okay, so that smart form has to be done by your timekeeper. It's all part of the process of informing the supervisor, but the intent to retire package is coming out from HR. You have to request it from them. You can do it on their website. You can do it by phone. Okay. Now, there was a question that came in that said, can you take the lump sum if you defer the benefit? Yes. If you defer the benefit, you're deferring the choice of lump sum versus annuity. And as a retiree, you always have that option. If you leave the company before 55 and 15, it's not your option anymore. It's the company's option, whether they're going to let you take a lump sum. Okay, so again, what do we expect interest rates to do? We expect them to go down in the first quarter. Where was that page? By about 0.25%. We expect them to then pop up again. And at this point, we're saying 17 to 18 basis points, but you know, that's really, really, really early to know that. It's just at this point an early indication that, as this chart shows, interest rates bottomed out, they came up, they went down, but they're now on their way back up again. All right. You could find a recording of this probably about a week from now, or you can hear an earlier version of it anytime you want. All of our webinars, well, unless we mess up or have a technical glitch somewhere in there, are recorded and posted here, bogartwealth.com, video events, or just under resources, video events. Okay. I think that's all the questions. Oh, by the way, so you can sign up. If you didn't get the email directly for this, you can sign up for the future ones here. We're not even asking for your phone number. Nobody's going to call you. If you make a different request over here, then yeah, we're asking for your phone number, but nobody's going to call you unless you ask for a call. Again, a not at all hidden agenda. We'd love to meet with you one-on-one, talk about how these numbers work for you. And here are emails for all of us advisors. Again, if you want the package, just send me an email and we'll get the package to you. Hang on if there's any more questions. But if I don't see any more questions, I'll be signing off. Thank you for joining today.